On September 29th, we arrived at Olympic National Park. The weather on the day of our arrival was the best we were expecting during our stay in Olympic, so we did the 17-mile ride to the top of the Hurricane Ridge that takes in sweeping views of the Olympic Mountains. We enjoyed several short hikes to the different viewpoints and just took the time to enjoy the scenic beauty of Hurricane Ridge and the Olympic Mountains. Our first night camping was at Solduck Campground, and the weather was starting to turn rainy. We made a stop at Salmon Cascades on the way to our campground, and we got to watch the coho salmon jumping up through the cascades. We could have stayed here all evening, and this ended up being the highlight of our trip to Olympic National Park. We were up early the next morning to get a good parking spot to hike one of the most popular trails in Olympic National Park and to one of their most beautiful waterfalls, Solduck Waterfalls. And it was very beautiful. Took some quick shots and headed out. We had a long day ahead of us. I was very excited to be at the beach and to finally see the Pacific Ocean up in Washington State. I had wanted to see the big rock formations of this area, and it was exciting to finally be here. The Hoh Rainforest receives 140 inches of rainfall on average each year. The hike on the Hall of Mosses Trail is the best way to take in the scenic beauty of this area. The Hoh Rainforest has been on my bucket list for years. And unfortunately, I think the day was just too sunny and it washed the colors out. It was still beautiful, and the moss hung heavy in all the trees, but it just wasn't what I expected. I think I had too high an expectation for this area. We were making our way down the coast, and our next stop was at Ruby Beach. It's known for its unique reddish sand and dramatic sea stacks. We loved that all of these beaches were dog-friendly, and the girls were getting out and were able to stretch their legs and explore and look at this beautiful area. Our next stop was Claylock, and to see the Tree of Life, a tree suspended across a cave with its roots seemingly going into nowhere but still alive. Again, the girls got to enjoy us, and we get to walk the beach before heading further down the coast. And a rare shot of the van being a hot mess after all this travel. Our Thousand Trails membership was paying off in the Pacific Northwest. You can see all these green hearts are our campgrounds, and we utilized a lot of them. Our first stop on the coast was at Thousand Trails Oceana, and there were walking trails right out to the beach. I think it may have been the season, but we had the beaches completely to ourselves, and we could walk for miles each day. We found these gooseneck barnacles on the beach. They are considered to be the most expensive seafood there is, at over $100 a pound. And we found lots of sand dollars on our first day. Our next stop was at Long Beach Thousand Trails, and again, trails right to the beach from the campground, and this had an amazing trail system near it, and we took long walks every day. We even hiked to North Head Light. I believe this was about a 5-mile hike from our campground. The weather was perfect for hiking, in the 60s and slightly overcast, and the girls loved it. We saw lots of banana slugs on our walks. This is the second largest slug in the world. They can be up to 9 inches in length and 4 ounces in weight, and they travel at 6 inches per minute. And they are an important part of the forest ecosystem in the Pacific Northwest. The girls were tired after their 5-mile hike the previous day, so John and I set out on what would end up being an 8-mile round-trip hike to Cape Disappointment, and we hiked it right from the campground. A little bit of it was on the road, but it was great to really get out there and do a long hike. This is the view into Dead Man's Cove, just before Disappointment Lighthouse. And this was a fun day, and it was a great hike and a great way to end our time in Washington. Another bucket list landmark, the Astoria Bridge. It is part of US 101 and it connects Oregon and Washington. It is 4 miles long and it is the longest continuous truss bridge in North America. Next up was the Astoria Column. It is located on Coxcomb Hill in Astoria, overlooking the mouth of the Columbia River. It is 125 feet tall, and it has a 164-step spiral staircase that ascends to the exterior observation deck. We climbed up to the top, and we got some great views out across to the bridge. And then the thing to do is to fly little wooden airplanes off the top. It was a fun experience. We were camping at Thousand Trails Seaside for the next few nights, and it would take us several days going to Cannon Beach before we could get a really good view of Haystack Rock. But we enjoyed each trip. In addition to the views of the rock, we really enjoyed getting there at low tide and exploring the tidal pools. We saw lots of big starfish and anemones and just enjoyed the waves crashing on the shore and tried not to get our feet wet as we ran out to look at the pools. I guess we just missed the puffins. They come each year. What a bummer. It would have been great to see them. We decided to go to Ecola State Park to hike the Clatsop Loop Trail. We had no idea that the road in to this park would be so bad. It was actually worse than driving the Going to the Sun Road. But we did it. We drove the van down in there and we had a great hike. The loop is about 2.9 miles with over 700 feet of elevation, and it takes you up to some great viewpoints. There was an undercast, and it was really beautiful that day. And we got some great views out to Tillamook Lighthouse, known as Terrible Tilly. Both girls enjoyed the hike. After taking in the view of the lighthouse, we continued up further to the top, where there was actually a small camping area and some huts where we took a quick break. I think we had a little bit of rain. And this area is so lush. It must get a lot of rain each year. And we were thankful on the way out that we got to follow somebody, so we knew if cars were coming. But both girls fell fast asleep and slept the whole way back to the campground. We were up early again the next day for another hike at Cape Falcon in Oswald West State Park. It's a hike that can get pretty wet when it's foggy. And guess what? It was a foggy day. It was about a 4.5-mile hike with about 580 feet of elevation. And we were rewarded with really great views out across the ocean when we got to the top. The girls, again, enjoyed the hiking. And they got quite muddy, as you can see how dirty my shirt is here. On the hike down, we got to enjoy the way the light was streaming through the trees and the moss looked beautiful lit up like this. And it was wet and it was muddy. And so by the end of this hike, we had 2 very, very filthy dogs, very much in need of a bath. After finishing the hike, we drove to Hug Point State Recreation Site. This is just 5 miles south of Cannon Beach. This beach is fun to explore because there are many caves that have been carved into the sandstone cliffs. Before the highway was built, this was the only way to travel this piece of the coast. You can walk the route that stagecoaches used to take, and you can still see wheel ruts carved into the rocks. The next day, we drove to Fort Stevens State Park to see the haunting remains of the wreck of the Peter Iredale. The ship ran aground in thick fog and strong currents in October of 1906. The impact snapped all 3 masts, but all people on board were rescued safely, and the wreck immediately became a tourist location. Our next stop was at Fort Clatsop. This was the final winter encampment of the Lewis and Clark expedition, 1805 to 1806. We were able to walk through the replica of the log fort that included bunk rooms and officers' quarters, as well as take a scenic walk through the coastal rainforest. The next day, we had a beautiful ride from Seaside, Oregon, down to Pacific City, taking in secluded beaches, wildlife, and just a fun trip. Unfortunately, we arrived at Pronto Pup before lunch, so we weren't able to sample it, but this is known as the original corn dog. The batter is just a little lighter than a corn dog. We will definitely sample it if we come back this way. One of the must-stop locations on the Oregon coast is the Tillamook factory. We enjoyed a flight of ice cream and some of our favorite flavors, and then took a self-guided tour of the factory. And of course, we never give up any opportunity to clown around for a shot. Our next stop, perched above a 200-foot bluff, was Cape Meares. We checked out the octopus tree, a 250 to 300-year-old Sitka spruce with multiple arms extending upward, resembling an octopus. We all enjoyed the short hiking trails here and the beautiful views of secluded beaches and the ocean. The Cape Meares Lighthouse is just 38 feet tall and the shortest lighthouse on the Oregon coast, but its powerful Fresnel lens can cast light 21 miles across the ocean. We finished our day with a foggy walk along the beach at Cape Kiwanda. We didn't have quite enough time to hike up the top of the dunes. The next day, we had clear views of yet another haystack rock, also known as Chief Kiwanda Rock. This rock is over 320 feet high, even taller than the one on Cannon Beach. There were clear views of the 250-foot high dunes, and I really wish we'd had time to climb them. We had an epic driving day ahead of us down the Oregon coast, with our first stop at Cape Foulweather. This is classic Oregon coast, with towering cliffs and dynamic ocean views. Up next was Devil's Punch Bowl, a collapsed sea cave caused by crashing waves. Yaquina Head Lighthouse was our next stop. It was built in 1873. It is a 93-foot brick tower resting on a basalt cliff, and the views from this area are beautiful. We stopped at a beautiful beach further down the coast called Garnet Beach to look for garnets. Unfortunately, we didn't find any, but we continued riding down the coast and taking in several other beaches. This is Seal Rock. This beach was a spectacular location to watch the waves crashing over the rocks. It was a foggy ride down Route 101 that day, and our goal was to find a parking spot and hike the Hobbit Trail. This hike is like hiking down a moss-draped tunnel with twisted trees, and then you end up at a secluded beach. Unfortunately, we had a lot more fog. We were done with the hike very quickly and decided to continue on to the Heceta Head Lighthouse. The way the sun was shining through the fog made this magical. And there were tons of spider webs, thousands, and the sun just shone right through them. It was truly amazing. This was another beautiful lighthouse, and we had earned this hike. It ended up being almost 5 miles round trip with 1,200 feet of elevation gain. Our final stop of the day ended up being one of our favorite spots on the Oregon coast, Cape Perpetua, to see Thor's Well. And watching the water just churn here was definitely a highlight. We stayed a very long time. If you are ever driving this section of 101, don't miss Darlingtonia. You want to see the cobra lilies. These are fly-eating plants, and they're pitcher plants, and the only ones that grow in Oregon. And we arrived at what would be our final stop on the Oregon coast, South Jetty Thousand Trails, and we quickly checked out the dunes near the location. It was mid-October, and we were getting almost daily rain and lots of fog, so it was time to head inland. And so we set our sights on Lassen Volcanic National Park with an overnight in Redding, and we were delighted to find our first In-N-Out burger of the trip. And we spent a great overnight at the Wind River Resort and Casino and rested up for the next part of our adventure.